What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here. Welcome into the Thomas Mott Show on a Wednesday. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm very excited to have Sal Paolantonio of ESPN on today to discuss the Philadelphia Eagles, what's going on in the NFC. Sal, I must say, I've been a big fan almost my entire life, and to get to talk to you on the show today is great. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for your persistence. I know it's been a difficult process, sometimes tracking me down, but when the football team in your hometown's 11-1, you see all this gray hair, Thomas. I'm 66 years old, so they keep me running, Thomas. They keep me running.
How has the season been for you covering? Obviously, you cover a lot of different football teams, but you mentioned the team in your hometown. Being, I would argue, a Philadelphia Eagles fan, or at least, focusing in on Philadelphia. You mentioned 11-1. Is it more exciting? Is it more challenging as an ESPN reporter on your end?
Well, it's definitely more challenging because ESPN is always putting extra on my plate. When the Eagles are good, that's good business for us because, the Eagles are one of the top 5 popular teams nationwide. They have a very strong national following. If you look at all the metrics in terms of fan engagement, in terms of jersey sales, in terms of how they travel, all of those things, the top 5 are Dallas, of course, Eagles are up there, Pittsburgh, Green Bay Packers, New England Patriots. The Giants are in the top 10 for sure. So you got 3 of the top 10 in terms of fan engagement in the NFC East, and I'm right in the wheelhouse of it. So I covered a lot of Giants, a lot of Eagles, and this year a lot of Jets. So I've been up and down the Jersey Turnpike. Got to polish off that easy pass.
It's been an exciting year so far for Philadelphia. I think it's a different year, though, and you're a lot more, I'd say, plugged in locally than I am being down here in Atlanta. I'm really curious how you feel the atmosphere is in Philadelphia right now, because we have really a couple of seasons to compare to this one, but truly 2017 is the only one where Philadelphia went all the way. But the hype feels similar and yet very, very different from my perspective. Like the Carson Wentz run and then the injury, and of course, Doug Peterson being established head coach at that point. Is it different this year for you looking at Philadelphia with them being 11-1 versus where they were in 2017?
Well, first of all, I think this team is as popular as the one in 2017, and maybe more so among a younger audience, right? Since 2017, Thomas, so much has happened in social media, the expansion of social media and the use of social media and team engagement on social media. So everything in our ESPN metrics and our studies and what we look at shows that more and more younger fans are engaging in the NFL nationwide and internationally, and especially in big cities like Philadelphia and New York, Boston and Dallas, and the West Coast, not so much. But you get my point. My point is that while 2017 was the explosion, this year they hit the launch pad and pressed the launch button. And the interest in the team is magnificent. It's great. Everywhere I go, people want to engage in questions and challenge me. It's fantastic. Keeps me young.
Jalen Hurts is probably one of the big reasons why I think for the explosion of young people. He's just so, I don't know if it's because he's relatable, because of how great he's been this year, but it's an electric thing to watch what he's done on the football field. And for me, it's the transformation from where it was last year. I've always been a Hurts guy. When they drafted him, I was a little bit of like, okay, Carson's the established starter. What are we trying to do here? I remember the discussion was, is this Taysom Hill 2.0? But since making him the starter at least full-time last year, I've truly believed that he would become at least a decent NFL starter. I don't think anybody predicted he would be this good. I was looking at numbers yesterday, and the completion percentage was so dramatically different from this year to where it was last year. It doesn't really happen from a college quarterback going into the NFL. Like, you can get a little better. You can get a couple percentage points higher, but I think he's like 10 percentage points higher in completion percentage. The TD to interception ratio is 11-1. Covering Philadelphia for as long as you have, seeing all these different quarterbacks, did you expect this big of an explosion for Jalen Hurts from essentially year 1 starting last year to year 2 this season?
Well, let's look at the Jalen Hurts phenomenon, as I like to talk about it. He's the CEO of the team, and he put his money where his mouth was. After he injured his ankle against the Bucks in the playoff game last year, he said, my third year starts tomorrow. and he meant it. So he did all the work in the offseason. He went to California, and he worked on his footwork and his timing and his delivery. That paid off. The Eagles brought in A.J. Brown, his best friend. That paid off. And I sent you those offensive line metrics from ESPN Stats and Information. So Lane Johnson is at this stage in his career is having the best year of his career. And he's having the best year of any right tackle right now in the National Football League. Same goes for Jason Kelce in terms of pass block win rate. And for Jordan Mailata in terms of run block win rate, he is at the top of his game and the top of the NFL. So their offensive line is working really well, and they're on their way. You look at A.J. Brown, he's got 924 receiving yards, and Miles Sanders has 950 rushing yards. They're about to have a receiver and a runner over 1,000 yards, and it could happen this week against the Giants. So it's all running together. But the bottom line is when you have a dual threat quarterback who can also win from the pocket and is also the CEO of your team, and he's a coach's son, and he's coached by a coach's son. And this is very important, Thomas. They have an addictive personality and philosophy that has been really taken on by the entire team. Don't tell me what you did yesterday. Just tell me what you're going to do today to get better tomorrow. And that's a coach's philosophy, and it permeates through the whole team. And you can tell that Sirianni and Jalen Hurts are like this together on the same page. I'll give you a specific example of this, Thomas, and I talked about this on Sunday morning on SportsCenter and on Sunday NFL Countdown, and I brought a football with me to illustrate it. I don't know if you saw that live shot. So during the week, Nick Sirianni talked to Jalen Hurts about protecting himself. He's been hit the second most of any quarterback in the league, right behind Justin Fields in Chicago. So Sirianni spoke to Hurts about it, said, 1, slide early. 2, don't pound the sideline. Tuck it in your left hand and pound it with your right shoulder. I don't want you to see him do that, and I don't want you to see you take the big hits. Those 3 talking points, and he kept it concise. Those were the complete talking points, and he was hardly hit by the Titans except on, the couple of runs that he had up the middle. So they are together. It's wonderful to see, especially considering what we saw with Carson Wentz, the yin and the yang. If you remember, Donovan McNabb always at odds with T.O. Randall Cunningham had problems with Seth Joyner and Clyde Simmons and all those guys when I started covering the team. To see Hurts as the full CEO of the team and everybody on the same page, it's wonderful to see.
I wanted to ask about being the CEO. I think you laid it out very, very well. I think Eagle fans in general, maybe just NFL fans, they gloss over that, right? Brady's the CEO of his team, obviously. And Patrick Mahomes is the CEO of his football team. But they don't realize that a lot of these quarterbacks aren't. Like outward facing to us as fans, they are, but to you guys who at least in the locker rooms or around the football team, it's a lot harder than people realize. Carson Wentz is a great example. I thought he was in total control. You go back to 2017, it looked like he was in total control. There were no issues there. He was the clear leader in Philadelphia. And yet we've had a couple of players come out. Darren Sproles recently say it wasn't really the case. I mean, he was, a little bit upset when they were going on a run with Nick Foles. Was that a big thing that you noticed when Jalen Hurts first got there in terms of being a leader and trying to take over? Or was it really this season where he officially stepped into the CEO role?
I think it's officially this season, Thomas, to answer your question. I think it's happened organically at times and on purpose at other times. There was a point on Sunday night in the press conference, and you can see it on Instagram, where Jalen Hurts says, sometimes they don't listen to me. Did you see that, Thomas?
I did.
Yeah. All right. So who does that sound like? That sounds like your dad, your boss, right? Your mom. He's in charge, and the team should be thankful for it because he has the blood pressure of an astronaut. It is. If he weren't an NFL quarterback, he could go into the space program. Because he is just on an even keel, so purposeful, so earnest, so serious, a great teammate, however. You see him singing on Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson's Christmas album. And he went on the podcast with Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce. So I really have stopped searching for flaws. when it comes to Jalen Hurts. I really have. As a reporter, you're always looking for, okay, is there a problem here? Is there a weakness here? Thomas, I don't see one. I really don't. And I know that's effusive praise, and it sounds like I'm a fan. And, I grew up in New York. I went to school on Long Island. I've traveled all over the country, so I'm not an Eagles fan. I've been covering this team for 30 years, but I'm a fan of this guy.
It does feel like Eagle fans, especially slowly throughout this year, because there were a lot of them who were still kind of on the fence going into 2022, have really jumped onto that bandwagon, just like you talked about. If you were Howie Roseman, and that's big shoes to fill, because I think he's executive of the year, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, he's been fantastic this year. The contract of Jalen Hurts does come up in terms of potentially extending him a little bit early, right? They could wait and then do it 2 years from now, but you can do it this year, and a lot of people have suggested that they will. Based on what you just said, it sounds like if Sal Paolantonio was the GM of the Eagles, you'd be giving him big-time quarterback money as soon as you can, a.k.a. 2023, right?
I'd be living in a nice house at the Jersey Shore. I know that. Yes, Howie Roseman, Executive of the Year. Nick Sirianni, Coach of the Year. Jalen Hurts, MVP. But you know what, Thomas? Let's look at the schedule, all right? You got the Eagles at the Giants. Must win for the Giants, Thomas.
Right.
Must win for the Eagles. The Eagles do not want to go into Dallas only one game ahead of Dallas. That's a lot of pressure. So there's a lot of pressure on this team in the month of December to finish the job. So you asked me a very specific question. I'm going to punt. I'm going to say I'm not ready for that yet.
Okay.
I don't think the team is ready for that yet. Well, I just don't, because I'm looking at this schedule. So you got to play at the Giants, at the Bears, at Dallas. So even though you're 11-1, 3 games straight on the road, 2 of them against divisional opponents in the month of December.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are, what kind of team you have, and all the metrics and all the numbers. Not easy to do that. Not easy to do. And the pressure is you've got to really beat the Giants and the Bears so you don't go into Dallas only 1 game ahead of them, so that Dallas can catch up with 1 win, right? You want to be 2 games ahead. Am I correct about that or
I
not?
totally agree. No, I totally agree. And I think that kind of leads me into this question with the Dallas Cowboys is they're getting a lot of love nationally. And obviously, as you mentioned earlier on in the show, that they are the #1 team in terms of statistics, and people love listening to, Stephen A. talk about the Cowboys, or SportsCenter bring up the Cowboys. I think Eagle fans feel the pressure from them, but they also look at something like the Colts game on, was it Sunday night? And they go, well, the Colts were in it for half of the game, and then a couple of turnovers there, 5 by Matt Ryan, kind of drugged them back into that one. Let's say that the Eagles lose to either one of the next 2 games, so Giants or Bears. Most likely Giants, because we know where the Bears are sitting at with 3 wins. Does that get us to a point where it's a must win against the Dallas Cowboys because the #1 seed is so important with the extended playoff and the only team having a bye? Do you make Christmas Eve essentially your win and in playoff game? That way you can lock up the division, lock up the #1 seed, or do you still give them a chance to kind of climb back in there with Dallas having games against Tennessee? And I think they have Washington one more time, and maybe the Giants, if I'm correct.
That's a good question, Thomas. So first of all, I do believe the Eagles will beat the Giants. I think they have too much firepower for the Giants. I mean, the Giants are in a desperation mode, must-win mode.
Yeah.
I have respect for the Giants. I think they've had a super successful season. I like Brian Daboll. They missed their chance against the Commanders. They really did.
Yeah.
If they had, I thought they should have gone for it. I disagree with Daboll's decision. I think that it was silly to punt. You've had successful season, and put the trust in the players. And I thought that was a mistake. And as a result, they didn't get the win. And as Saquon Barkley said, it feels like a loss. I think it's a big letdown for them going into this game. But the Eagles just have so much firepower to run like they did against the Packers and then throw against the Titans shows that Jonathan Gannon could basically plug in any game plan based on Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, and Jason Kelce and Jalen Hurts. And you have those 4 components, which are the 4 pillars of what they do, and they can do anything offensively. So I think they beat the Giants. The Bears game is honestly, I don't dismiss the Bears.
Okay.
Why? Because Justin Fields is a wild card. He just has breakaway open field speed. And I just think it's a wild card. Plus, Chicago, you don't know what's going to be like next week in Chicago. It could be bitterly cold and windy, which, of course, is a great equalizer. So that's the game, to me, that sets up the Cowboys game on Christmas Eve. I'm not willing to speculate how they will do yet against the Cowboys because I think a lot of it depends on what's at stake. But Jalen Hurts is from Texas. There's a lot of players on this team that's familiar with the Cowboys. The Eagles coaching staff understands what the Cowboys do very, very well. Some teams have been able to neutralize it. The Packers did in Green Bay. They are playing at home. I mean, get your popcorn ready, man.
Do you think
Christmas Eve.
Do you think Odell Beckham Jr. makes any sort of impact on here? It's first off, it's getting a little annoying, right? Because every single week we hear this story of OBJ, Jerry Jones is trying to woo him, and yet it feels like it's been a month of this waiting for OBJ to sign. He met with 3 different teams the past couple of days, including, I think, Dallas's his last day is today. I guess the first question of a two-parter is, 1, he's going to sign with Dallas, right? And 2, if he does, will it make a big difference?
Well, I think he will sign with Dallas, but, he hasn't worked out. And I do believe Jerry Jones said it's impossible to really gauge or measure whether Odell Beckham Jr. is healthy or not without a workout.
Okay.
Obviously you can do a physical examination and that will tell you a lot. But, if you're looking for the big mamu, as they like to say, we got to see you work out. So I don't know. I don't think anybody does until people see whether he, can work out. And then we'll see what happens. But we're a long way from that. I don't think the Cowboys need OBJ to beat anybody right now. I'm not on the Cowboys hype machine, but I think you look at them, they have beat quality opponents. Prescott is playing well. He's not turning the ball over. CeeDee Lamb has become more and more confident like he was last week. They have a 2-headed monster at running back. They have arguably the best defensive player in the league in Micah Parsons. They move him around. He's like the old elephant player that the 49ers and the Cowboys used to do with Haley. So he's a great player. And there's one metric from ESPN.com that's pretty interesting. The percentage of hits, of times you hit the quarterback, knock him down or sack him. So the Cowboys are number 3 in the league behind Washington and the Jets in that metric. Knocking down, hitting, or sacking the quarterback on 25% of the offensive snaps. So they do get after the quarterback, which is the name of the game in the NFL right now.
It's definitely going to be a great test, and as you mentioned, we got to get to that test first by going through the Giants and the Chicago Bears. You're actually going to be on the call for Giants Eagles for ESPN Radio at MetLife in the booth with Chris Carlin, which is going to be great. Definitely check that one out on ESPN Radio. For that game, though, as we look ahead to the Giants, you mentioned them. You've taken the Eagles in this one. First off, are you more surprised by the Giants' overall season? Brian Daboll year 1, the question mark surrounding was Saquon Barkley going to be healthy? Is Daniel Jones a legit passer in this league? Or is the Washington Commander rise over the past 4 or 5 weeks impressed you more? Those are kind of 2 teams that I really thought were going to start to slide a little bit here later on in the year. And what do we know? Philadelphia's lone loss is Washington, and the Giants have had some up and down moments, but they're still, a winning football team right in the mix of a wild card for Chase.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right, Thomas? Because there's so much so in the same boat that they tied one another last week at MetLife Stadium and couldn't loosen from the grip of either team to get a win. So my analysis of where they are right now is this. The Giants had some really bad injuries on defense that's held them back. Wink Martindale and the Giants team is the number 1 blitzing team in the NFL. He wants to blitz and get home. That didn't happen in the 2 games against the Cowboys, and they got burned badly. They can't really run the defense that he wants to run because of it. 2, Daniel Jones, after having early success not turning the ball over, he's now beginning to do that. He had a costly fumble in the first quarter of that game against Washington. If he doesn't turn the ball over in the first quarter, I think it changes the approach of the coaching staff all the way throughout. I think they got a little too conservative, especially in the fourth quarter and overtime. They had 6 punts on 6 straight possessions after that third quarter touchdown in the beginning of the third quarter. So they got super conservative. They couldn't execute. And then people, when your quarterback's not executing, you're loading up the box on Saquon Barkley. So that's where the Giants are, and that plays, I think, right into the hands of where the Eagles are right now as a team. I think they're going in opposite directions. As for Washington, Taylor Heineke, Thomas, has been playing with house money, right? Does his life change if he, really, at this point? He is just playing with a sort of, not reckless abandon, but with purposeful abandon.
Right.
And I think it just shows. The team's got confidence as a result. He's making throws that Carson Wentz would hold on to the ball too much. The ball's just coming out, like Mike White with the Jets.
Yeah.
Zach Wilson was holding on to the ball. White's getting the ball out of his hands quickly. Same with Taylor Heineke. Hut, ball out.
No, I totally agree, and I do think that your prediction of the Bears game being a little bit trickier, especially let's say they beat the Giants by double digits, 14-21, then they're really flying high at 12-1. You're thinking ahead to Dallas on Christmas Eve, you just kind of gloss over Chicago. Maybe it's snowing, maybe it's sleeting a little bit, heavy wind, heavy rain. It could make for a really interesting game in the next couple of weeks. As we look at the NFC playoffs in general, I did this on my show yesterday. It's fascinating how the NFC is really, turning out this year, because you have Philadelphia at the top, only by, a little bit, really half a game right now with the Vikings. Vikings defense, major concerns. Kirk Cousins, can he win a playoff game? He had that one against the Saints a couple years ago, but you still have that question mark. But then you have this cluster of San Francisco, no longer with Jimmy G, the Bucks, who can't do anything until, 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter last night. Then you have this Cowboy, Giant, Seahawk, Commander cluster there in the wild card. When we talk about threats to Philadelphia, are you Vikings number one threat? Are you Niners with Brock Purdy now number one threat? Is it Dallas? Where would you go in terms of your biggest fear in an opponent matchup with Philadelphia?
Well, I only have 5 teams right now that I see advancing to the Super Bowl in both conferences.
Okay.
Eagles, Dallas, Bills, Chiefs, Bengals.
Okay.
I think Minnesota's played a weak schedule. I don't like the way they play defense. They're too soft in their coverages, and that allows teams like Dallas to move the ball up and down the field. Brock Purdy, I watched a little bit of him on tape. I didn't see the game, but I went back and looked at him. He had a 6-for-11 drive that went down the field for 75 yards, and he looked like he was cooking with gas, man.
Yeah.
Ball was coming out quickly. He was, distributing the ball well. He was seeing the entire field. So he looks like he has some fearlessness to him. And I think, Todd Bowles now with Tampa coming in this week will be a good test for him. Miami was proven to be, come on. You allow Brock Purdy to go up and down the field on you.
Yeah.
We know San Francisco's defense is pretty good, and you would have problems with that, but there's no excuse for the 262nd pick in the draft coming in cold like that, just to move the ball up and down the field. So that raises questions about Miami's defense. So I take them out of the equation. The Bucs, yeah. If Mark Ingram goes past the yard marker, there's no comeback.
It's over. Yep.
So, luck is the residue of design, right, Thomas?
I totally agree. Do you fear Brady at all? If you were like Dallas, I'm kind of torn, because Dallas to me is that big threat in terms of the actual playoff matchup, whether you're divisional round or the NFC Championship game. But Dallas as the 5 seed would go to Tampa as the 4 seed right now, and it seems like Tampa is stuck as the 4 seed. I'm trying to think how to word this question, because we know the Bucs aren't really good this year. They can't run the football. Their offensive line is super beat up. Their defensive line is not as good as it has been in the past years. But is there something about Tom Brady in a wild card game on the road that might give Dak Prescott and those Cowboys some problems or issues?
Well, I think, you have to look at the way the Cowboys attack the quarterback position. So teams seem to be reluctant to blitz Brady ordinarily.
Yeah.
Frequently, decisively, creatively. I'm running out of adjectives. So I don't understand why they don't blitz him more. I was shocked that the Saints didn't do that, considering the injuries and changes on the offensive line and Brady's immobility. So I think you go in there, and if you're Dallas and you're Dan Quinn, you just unload on Tom Brady the entire game.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense, and that was always the the Achilles heel of Tom Brady. If you go back to the first couple of Super Bowl losses, it was the Giants being able to get after him and being able to get him on the ground and pressure up the middle that causes him to get off his platform and then not be able to move out of it because of he's not a running quarterback. And so I was shocked too last night whenever the Saints weren't able to do that. And I think Micah Parsons could have a real field day with him.
Could have one. So I think it'll be an interesting game because it's Brady.
Yeah.
And, man, talk about Buffalo ratings.
Let me ask you about Nick Sirianni here before we go ahead and wrap up. Nick Sirianni, to me, is one of the more fascinating case studies in recent NFL coaching history because here's a guy who, on paper, looks like he's going to be very successful whenever Philadelphia hires him, right? He comes from the right coaching tree, offensive-minded guy. He's younger. Those seem to be the three kind of ingredients you want to mold out of. It's the whole Sean McVay that everyone's really excited about right now in the National Football League. And then he has this introductory press conference, which to me was so ridiculous that they criticized him for it, but whatever, they did. And then he has a very interesting year last year where, first 6 games, he refuses to run the football and Jalen Hurts is struggling throwing. And then he does run the football, and yet the progress isn't really big enough to win enough games to threaten somebody in the postseason. You saw what happened in the Tampa Bay round. This year, it's night and day. I mean, the entire team, we've talked about it. Jalen Hurts looks better. They made a couple of key additions. He's not only running the football well, he's mixing in passes. They can beat you both ways. What's Sirianni like as a head coach in terms of other ones that you've been around? Is he different from, the mold that you've seen throughout the past 10 or 15 years in the NFL? Is he his own unique thing, or do you think he takes a lot from what's been successful the past couple of years with some of these other younger head coaches?
I think he's learning on the fly, just like a lot of their coaching staff. I think he learns from Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach. I think he's learning from Jalen Hurts. I think he's constantly willing to change. I like his adaptability skills. I think his approach of take the football away and explosive plays. He always tells me before the game that his final message to the team is let's win the double positive. Let's win the turnovers and let's win the explosive plays. And, he coaches that way, and he coaches in a very specific way to each player. And I think the way he has created personal connections with his players, depending on their age, their experience level, their role on the team, he has molded and adapted and adopted different styles for different players. He has a tremendous connection with Jalen Hurts, and I think that's what's driving the team. One, as I said before, these are 2 sons of coaches, both of them. So they came up in a grinded kind of household and mentality, and on the field and off. What are we doing to get better? How are we approaching life and the game so that we stay on track? And those are powerful tools to have, powerful philosophy to have. So I don't want to compare him to anybody. I would say he's the perfect coach for this team and for this quarterback right now. Perfect.
What would you say to somebody? I had a tweet yesterday, and it was ridiculous, but people like to rip the Eagles if they're not Eagle fans. It happens in the National Football League, and he was saying something about how this is Steichen's offense. It's Steichen's offensive success with Jalen Hurts. This is Jonathan Gannon's success defensively, and what is Nick Sirianni actually doing? Which is, I know, ridiculous. But what would you say to somebody who would still criticize Nick Sirianni based on the fact that he's not calling plays, that Steichen gets a lot of love offensively, and that Gannon has right now, the number 2 defense in the National Football League?
Well, that's several questions, Thomas. So let's take them one at a time. First of all, I'm glad I'm not on Twitter.
Smart not to be, yeah.
I think I'm maybe the only one on TV who's not on Twitter. I don't know how I've avoided it all these years, but I'm happy that I have. So I thank goodness I don't have to react to tweets. So let's take that and throw it out.
Right.
Let's just take the question, which is a good one that you developed there. First of all, I don't want my head coach calling the plays. I want my head coach being the CEO, the general on the field, right? You have generals, then you have lieutenants,
right.
You have colonels. I was in the military, that. I believe in the military philosophy of chain of command. Sirianni sets the tone. He sets the tone with his coaching principles, And he sets the tone by empowering others to do their job at an exemplary level. That's what you want your general to do. Doesn't matter if you're running UPS, a battle division in the Army. It doesn't matter if it's a football team or a baseball team. You want the guy in charge to set the tone with principles, making connection with people, and allowing them to flower, to use one of his metaphors. And I think he has done that. Is it Shane Steichen's offense? No, it's Jalen Hurts' offense. Thomas, this is Jalen Hurts' offense.
Right.
When you want to run for 363, which, by the way, was the highest total since Harry Truman was president.
Right.
Or you want to drop 380 in the passing game on the Titans on Sunday in successive weeks, which, by the way, he did when he came out. He was off the field for 9 minutes and 40 seconds in the fourth quarter and still dropped 380 on him.
Right.
Not 40 seconds, 9 minutes and 40 seconds. More than half the fourth quarter, he was on the bench and still dropped. So back-to-back weeks, they ran the ball explosively and threw the ball explosively, ran the ball at historic level, and threw the ball when the quarterback hardly was on the field for the entire game. So it is Jalen Hurts' offense. When you have a dual-threat quarterback who can win decisively from the pocket, you've hit gold.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And Steichen, I think his progress play calling wise has been very successful. But to your point, people forget the fact that without Jalen Hurts, what is this offense actually doing? I mean, what are they actually able to do? You know,
Yeah.
The whole idea of Gardner Minshew last year, whenever there were a little bit of calls there, it's just ridiculous to think of another quarterback running this offense and even getting close to being that successful.
Thomas, let me really state this emphatically for you. The first time I'm on your show, and I hope you have me back before the end of the season. This is Jalen Hurts' team. This is Jalen Hurts' offense, okay? The team takes its cues from his attitude on and off the field at the press conferences behind the center. This is Jalen Hurts' offense. He runs it like he wants to, in a way that he wants to against, Titans can't defend the pass. We're going to throw it.
Right.
Packers can't defend the run. We're going to run it. That's Jalen Hurts. You can't do that. You can't have that Sybil, that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde offense week to week without a guy who can do both things. And anybody who wants to question Jalen Hurts as the MVP, most valuable player to his team, it should be unanimous, honestly, in my view.
I think it really should be. It's amazing that people still want to say, well, Mahomes this or Josh Allen that. And
great players. They're great players.
I get
but
it.
This year, he is the number one player for that team that happens to have, let's not forget, the best record in the National Football League. And this is a guy who, I'm not an Eagles fan. You don't see any Eagles gear here. I mean, I like the Eagles doing well. I get to eat my wife's lasagna and sleep in my own bed.
I totally understand. I have all the Eagles gear, and yet even if I could just pull away all this Eagles stuff, I would still say he's the NFL MVP. I want to wrap up with this last question. I'll let you go. I really appreciate you coming on the show here. This has been fantastic. I like a personal question here, more of a Sal Paolantonio-based one. You get to call Eagles Giants on Sunday. We mentioned that for ESPN Radio. I, in college, got to call some Baylor football games from a radio booth. It's absolutely fantastic. There's so many different aspects of calling a football game that just make it one of the most fun jobs you can have, in my opinion, in the entire country of America. What's the best part for you? You've been doing it a while, at ESPN for a while, but you get to wake up Sunday morning and drive to MetLife Stadium and call Eagles Giants. What's the one thing that gets you out of bed Sunday morning for a game like that?
Wow, gosh. So this is my 30th year covering the league, and I've only been in the radio booth. Thank you for ESPN giving me this opportunity. They don't do it for non-players very much.
Right.
So it's rare. And I'm really grateful that ESPN allowed me to do this in my latest contract, my 11th contract with ESPN. So I think all of it, I love the atmosphere. I love the fans. I love the players. I love being around the players and the coaches. I love listening to people. And, when I'm at a game, Thomas, I just listen to people and ask questions and try to soak in as much atmosphere and knowledge and then convey that to the audience. Go in tabula rasa. Go in with a clear mind of what to expect. see things, make observations, hear people say stuff, and try to report as much as possible. You know, my goal on Sunday is to talk to both head coaches before the game and impart to the audience the wisdom or instructions that they gave the team either Saturday night or Sunday morning. Just give the fans an opportunity to go to a place that they can't get to on their own. They can't buy a ticket to the locker room. They can't buy a ticket to the team hotel. So it's my job not to really say, hey, this is going on the field, because, you know, everybody can see that. It's to tell the people what's going on behind the scenes, what's happening behind the scenes, that I think, you know, if you're asking me what gets my juices flowing, just being able to find out that information and get the audience to react to it.
There you go. Well, listen, we're very excited for the game on Sunday, the call on Sunday, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I'd love to have you on before the season ends.
Okay, great job, Thomas. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sal. I appreciate it.